Welcome to another episode of Interviewing the Experts. I'm so excited for this conversation with Stefanie Broes, the co-founder of Moonbird. And we met at a conference recently. We connected over your story and over Moonbird, which we'll talk about
Yeah.
today. But yeah, so your background is you have a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, which I think is really interesting now
Mhm.
based off of what you're sharing in the world. But why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what got you into, founding Moonbird and really getting into tactical breathing devices and breathing in general.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here, Devin. I started Moonbird already 4 years ago, and I started the company because I had a sleeping problem myself. So I think many of the listeners can relate to that.
Mm.
And during I developed that sleeping problem during my PhD, and I was obviously aware of a lot of drugs and pharmaceutical things that you can do to resolve that problem. But I felt the need to not grab to those medications. And I first wanted to find whatever I could do on my own and in a natural way to deal with those sleeping problems. And so it's a bit like a quest that I had for myself that
Mm.
led me to investigate natural alternatives. So I was already practicing yoga for a long time and then ended up with meditation. Um, and then finally, I discovered how meditation is very different from breath work.
Mm.
In the beginning, I thought they were very similar because you often meditate using your breath as an anchor. So I thought that meditation and breathing exercises were a lot similar. But then I discovered that breathing is actually very different and that it can calm your nervous system down within a couple of seconds. And so I started experimenting with that and then still struggled to do that because when you're having sleeping problems, your mind is just going everywhere.
Yeah.
And I found it really hard to focus. And I think a lot of people can relate to that as well. And so I really wanted to make it easier for myself to stay focused on the breathing exercises and to reap the benefits of that. And so
Mm.
that's really the genesis of the company and where the idea of Moonbird came from.
So you started exploring, a little bit of background in yoga, and you started to researching or understanding, experimenting with different breath techniques. And you were looking for a solution because you struggled with insomnia yourself. And what was kind of what did you find as a result of really practicing these techniques with breathing? I know you said that, okay, it was a challenge to stay focused, right? And I'm sure you probably explored some of the meditation apps and things like that. What kind of led you to tactical slow breathing? Like, was it just through your own experimentation? Was it through research that got you interested? Was it one type of breathing that really helped your sleep? I'm just really curious, like what that arc looked like for you.
Yeah. So first of all, when it came to breath work or slow breathing exercise itself, I'm a scientist by training and I really looked at the science. And so for me, it started there. I read all these scientific papers of both meditation, but also about breath work and how they are effective and how this is scientifically proven for already like 30 years. And so I was actually quite surprised that I never learned that in my education because I thought like, hey, this is like natural thing that we can all do to calm ourselves down. Why haven't I heard of this? So
Mm.
that was like the first thing that convinced me. And then I started to try it out, to experiment with it myself. And so indeed, I ordered different kind of breathing products that could help me manage my breathing. I already downloaded like Headspace and Calm, and I
Mm.
really love those apps. But when you're having sleeping problems, the last thing you want to do is like open your phone and search
Mm.
for an app, right? Because your mind is just like looking for things to focus its attention on. If you then give it a phone, it's just like you're lost. So I do love the apps, and I still use them for like my meditation practice. But for my breathing practice, I wanted something else. So for me, it was really important that there was like an offline solution that could guide my breathing and make it easier for me to keep my focus. And so that's when it really like hit me like what are the different ways in which we can guide ourselves. So if it's not the visual because that's looking at something, if it's
Mm.
not the auditive cues because that's listening to something, and for me like both listening and the auditive cues, they require like some attention and some focus of me. And that actually kept me awake.
Mm.
Um, and we can't use like smelling and tasting because that's too subtle and too difficult to guide ourselves. So I then, the last sense that I could use was the sense of touch. And then suddenly, like it was literally when I was lying awake in my bed, I realized like we use a sense of touch to communicate to each other. That's why we hug people. It's why when you cradle a baby to sleep, the baby feels the mom or the dad being calm as well. And this really calms the baby down as well. So this element, this tactile element and the sense of touch for me was like at that moment it was like crucial. And that's really what I wanted to mimic in the device that was about to guide my breathing. And so the next day, my brother, who's my co-founder, came over to visit me and have dinner with me. And I said to him, I think I want to develop like a breathing avocado device. We still sometimes call it like that because it has a little bit the shape of an avocado, right? So it's a device that you hold in your hand and it starts to like expand and contract in the palm of
Mm.
your hand. And this movement guides your breathing in a very easy and intuitive way. So that was how we came about that tactile aspect of it. And there is a neurological reason for that as well. That's what I discovered only later, like looking at the science again, is that the way we process information from our environment works different in our brain. And if we process information visually or auditively, it requires much more brain power because
Mhm.
it's a sensory modality that's been developed later in our evolution. And the sense of touch requires a lot less processing power, brain power. So it is indeed an easier, more calmer way of processing information.
Makes perfect sense. So one of the big things I think, and this is to your own discovery, it's how can we get out of our, I always say, get out of our heads and into our bodies.
Yeah.
Like what, and that so many people today that struggle with sleep issues or anxiety,
Mhm.
we're just so caught up in the mind. And people are looking for, okay, how can I slow my mind down? I often hear people say, I have a racing mind that keeps me up, or my
Mhm.
mind is just so busy. And one of the tools that we always are recommending people to, or strategies, is like, hey, do anything that can get you back into your body and get you
Yeah.
feeling safe. Um, and one of the things that I love about what you created is, for me, at least when I was experimenting and holding it, it kind of feels like a little baby. Like for me, it was like a little baby bird that was like breathing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it keeps your attention and it anchors your attention back into your body, which I think is so important. We live in such a world where we're mostly problem solving, we're thinking, and most, as you're well aware, at least from my perspective, people that are highly intelligent, really
Mm.
care, often experience insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a it's people that are really thinkers, and they have big hearts. They experience insomnia, and they're mostly in their heads.
Yeah.
And so I love that you've created something that's tactile that people can actually hold on to, that doesn't involve, like you said, using the eyes or the ears or these other things that actually can are difficult when you're sleep deprived and when you're kind of in pain.
They're keeping your brain busy and you need to shut your brain off if you want to doze off to sleep, right? And so that's really what I experienced as well the first few times that I experiment with breath work. And I felt that if I lower my breathing rate, but I have to do it like really slow as well, I feel that my body relaxes into this deep sleep mode. And that's the moment sometimes that I realize like, oh my God, I wasn't thinking for a couple seconds. I am completely in my body and my body is like dozing off to sleep. And it's one of our customers like wrote a review and I think that just perfectly sums it up. And she says like, I finally felt how it felt to relax my body. I finally knew how it felt to relax my body or how my body is when it's relaxed. And that's really what this can enable. It can really allow you to enter into that deep sleep. And so it does this by two modes of action. First of all, by holding the device in your hand and by resting your attention on the movement and focusing yourself on this, which is super intuitive and doesn't require a lot of processing power, you're not thinking because your mind is focused on the movement and on feeling this in your hand. And at the same time, you're mimicking the breathing movement and you're breathing really slowly, which in a couple of minutes triggers the parasympathetic nervous system or the natural relaxation system of your body. So there's like this dual way in which it ensures that you get out of your mind and into your body.
I love it. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the parasympathetic and the
Mm-hmm.
sympathetic nervous system, because I feel like most people that either struggle with insomnia or that struggle with anxiety or anxiety about sleep, they have a really hard time getting into the parasympathetic. And I
Mm-hmm.
always believe, and I've seen after working with, thousands of people over the
Mm-hmm.
last 7 years, once people can start to retrain their parasympathetic nervous system, then sleep does happen. It happens because it's
Mm-hmm.
such a natural process. Um, so, and I know on the device, one of the things that I really liked as well is the heart rate, and then you guys have the heart rate variability to sort of
Mm-hmm.
track, all of that. So, can you speak a little bit about that, as far as, maybe how breathing can get us back connected to our parasympathetic, and then we can kind of talk about heart rate and heart rate variability and sort of the more sciencey
Yeah.
fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we basically have a nervous system in our body, and it consists of like a part that we control. Like I'm raising my hand right now, it's something that I control. But then on the other hand, there's automatic nervous system. That's what I'm not controlling. It's my heart rate, my breathing rate, and all these things that happen autonomously in our body. And there are basically two mechanisms of action. It's like speeding ourselves up, accelerating ourselves. That's the sympathetic nervous system or the stress response, which actually keeps us alive. I don't
Yep.
want to say that stress is always bad. Like this system exists for a reason. If you're on the street about to get hit by a car, you jump out of the way before you even realize it. And that's your sympathetic nervous system, like saving your life.
Mm.
So it's actually a very good thing that we have this. The only thing is that we, or a lot of people in our society, have this chronically activated because of all the hats that we need to wear, all of the roles and responsibilities that we have, being constantly online and available and things like that. So many of us, and especially like you say, like those people who are hypersensitive, who are hyper intelligent, hyper like have a big heart and so on, they have what we call then hyper arousal after a
Mm.
while. So you're overly sensitive to everything in your room or your environment, which makes it very difficult to shut off this sympathetic nervous system response. And so then we have the other branch, which is a parasympathetic nervous system, and that's the the rest and digest mode, and that's the one that calms us down. It's what we also call the brake pedal, and it does the exact opposite. When you're about to get hit by the car, the first thing you do is like, so you hold your breath, your breathing rate is elevated, your heart rate goes up, you get the
Mm.
release of adrenaline, like this shot of adrenaline that rushes through your body. And then when we are in our parasympathetic mode, right, when your lover tells you that you look good at a candlelight dinner, what do you do? You sigh, you breathe out, you relax, your
Mm.
heart rate goes down, and you get these like emotions, these positive emotions, and so on. So you have a completely different shift in how you feel and how you respond to this. And so breathing and your heart rate as well is like impacted like instantaneously by these two modes. Shifting through your sympathetic nervous system, heart rate goes up, breathing rate goes up. Going to the other side, heart rate goes down, breathing rate goes down. And so, what the cool thing now is that breathing is one of the only controls, like remote controls, that we have to shift gears between these two systems. If we do like the upregulated breath work, like the Wim Hof breathing, and there are like conscious connected breathing techniques and so on, we go into that sympathetic nervous system mode. But if we downregulate our breathing rate, we will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the beautiful thing about breathing, because it's one of the only systems in our body that allows us to do that.
And we have it, it's always with us.
It's always with us.
Yeah, and I think it's so fascinating. I love these conversations. I feel like breath work and breathing tools and understanding the breath is sort of having this renaissance. And it's
Mhm.
kind of it's kind of funny to me in a way because it's just like it's such a natural thing. It's such a normal thing. It's like we've survived a couple of minutes without breathing.
Mhm.
But yet, as a society and as a global society, I feel like we've sort of lost the intelligence around how to utilize our breath
Mhm.
to, to improve our life.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, because it's something that's innate. It's something that if we're not doing it, we're not here. And
Mhm.
yet there's a lot of misunderstanding, or just not a lot of, I would say, awareness
Yeah.
around the power of choosing to breathe in a certain way, and how that physiologically affects our body with our parasympathetic nervous system, which you beautifully laid out, and our, sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
And so it's so cool. We were talking before we jumped on the recording about, we had you met Sachin Patel. We did an interview, and he was just talking about the sigh, like, and how that just changes. Like, even you can just feel it right away. And yet
Mm.
it's one of these things that I think most people don't think about, which again, it's why I love what you're doing and what you're up to. Not only is, do you have a product and a mission to serve people, but it's helping create the awareness.
Mm.
It's creating the awareness around, well, how can I get reconnected to my breathing in such a way
Mhm.
that I can instantly experience the effects?
Mhm.
Because it is instant.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is like literally our mission statement. It's creating the awareness around the fact that we can use our breath as a tool. And we want to provide you with the solutions that enable you to do that. But it all starts with that like awareness creation. And I like, if I could maybe after Moonbird or whatever, like after I've done this, I think I'll become like a breathwork evangelist and go to schools
Mm,
and hopefully to like prime ministers or whatever to convince them to like, let's teach this at schools. Let's
yeah,
teach our children how to breathe correctly. Let's teach them how to meditate. Because if you're young and you're able to learn these techniques, I believe that we will all be much more in line with ourselves and be able to regulate ourselves much better and as well with our environment. And the world would be just such a better place.
I agree. And I think it's a noble mission, and there's definitely a need and a place for it. And I know some advanced curriculums are starting to teach this, but it's
Yeah.
not in our everyday system. It's not
No.
in the system itself. And I thought it was interesting, in one of our previous conversations, you said there are mothers that are buying, this tool, Moonbird, for their kids. I thought that it makes perfect sense to me, and you even went so far that, you have these little things that you put over the device. Was that a beta test, or is that out now for people that, want to teach their kids how to breathe using a tool?
It's still under embargo.
Oh, okay. Sorry
No,
about
no,
that.
no, no worries. But no, exactly. So we actually have a lot of people buying the Moonbird for themselves in the beginning, and then eventually their children end up using the device. So then they buy another one for themselves. But then I thought, like, this device is not specifically geared towards children because obviously there is a heart rate sensor here. So for the people who do not know this yet, you can like optionally couple it to an app. And if you want to get insights in your data, you can check how your heart rate responds to the breathing exercise and so on. You can listen to additional audio guides. You can change the breathing rhythm as well, which is like important.
Yeah.
Um, Being an insomniac myself, my breathing rhythm is if I don't set my movement at the right pace, I
Hmm.
can't fall asleep with it. So the breathing rhythm is also like it's personalized. Um, anyway, so there are a lot of functionalities in this version that are not relevant to children. So that's why indeed we're now like developing yeah, Moonbird for kids, a Moon Buddy. We still not know how we're gonna call it, but to specifically develop it for children, yeah.
So cool. I love it. Well, let's kind of circle back to what we were talking about with the heart rate and the heart rate variability, because,
Mhm.
obviously it's a feature in the device, but I think it's important for people to understand,
Yeah.
heart rate variability. I mean, these are things that can kind of give us feedback, biofeedback, as
Yeah.
far as how our bodies are responding to whatever it is we're doing. Um,
Mhm.
and so you guys chose to incorporate that into the device. So have you noticed through different breathing rhythms or signatures that it affects different people's heart rate variability or heart rate in different ways. I mean, you kind of spoke to that a little bit about finding your personal rhythm. How would one do that? Either with the device or without the device, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so we indeed know that we all breathe at different rates. And if you breathe slowly, on average, I'd say you have a breathing rhythm of 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. So that's 6 breaths per minute. That's also what's used mostly in scientific research papers if they want to like evaluate the implementation or the effect of like a slow breathing exercise in a specific context. But we know that you can like optimize it a little bit. It will not change drastically, but depending of who you are, your age, how stressed you are that day and so on, it can
Hmm.
change a little bit because if you're very anxious, your breathing rate might be a bit higher.
Hmm.
So going that immediately to like a 5 in, 5 out might be a very huge difference, right?
Hmm.
So indeed depends a little bit on who you are and what like the context you're in at that moment in time. Now, finding that ideal breathing rhythm is not something that goes like instantaneously. So we have a heart rate sensor incorporated in the device, but it's not that you hold the Moonbird device for a couple of seconds and then it will automatically calculate your breathing rhythm. It's something that we hope to get to at a few years, but we have to collect a lot more data for that because it is so complex. But what we do in the app, and it allows you to do that as well, is you can breathe at different rhythms. And
Hmm.
then we'll see at which rhythm your heart rate variability is highest. And that means that you're like optimally balancing your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, and that breathing rhythm is like more ideal for you at that moment. But it takes like 10 minutes, like a 10 minutes check-in before we can do that exercise and then advise you on a specific breathing rhythm. That's one way to do it, and we guide you to find that ideal breathing rhythm. Another option is that you do it more pragmatically and that you just you try different breathing rhythms and you see what feels most comfortable for you. For me, for instance, my rhythm to fall asleep is different for a breathing exercise during the day, but to fall asleep is really like a very low, so that's 7 seconds in, 7 seconds out, or even more slowly.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I know some of the techniques that we share, breathing techniques in our program actually. We talk about
Mhm.
box breathing as,
Mhm.
and depending on if maybe it's a 4 count, maybe it's a 5 count, maybe
Yeah.
it's a 6 count, or the 4, 7, 8 breath. There's different I think I love what you said about just being open to experimentation to find what
Yes.
works for you. Because we are all unique. We all
Yeah.
breathe,
Yeah.
but we breathe in different ways and at different rates. And
Yeah.
so it's like, what is the rhythm that's going to make the most sense for you? Um, but I love, the thing also that's really important, I think, to mention here is just the bit about slowing down.
Mm.
I think one of the big reasons why so many people suffer from sleepless nights is because we live in such a world that it's always I use the word nexting. We're going
Mhm.
from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And there's not this moment. We don't, I think rest leads to sleep. And
Mhm.
so do you find that people or yourself, do you use breathing techniques during the day? Is there a certain period, time that you recommend that people actually use this device or do breathing to have the maximum benefit to retrain their parasympathetic nervous system to relax and feel safe and be able to sleep?
Yeah, so two things there. You're very right that in order to be able to fall asleep, you need to be relaxed. And I sometimes give workshops on this topic as well. And then I ask people like, what do you do before you go to sleep? And then some people say, yeah, I read books. But for me, for instance, reading books, there's a huge difference between reading the five management books of Bill Gates that you're like reading with a marker,
Yes.
and that's keeping your brain busy. That's not relaxing. You can watch like a movie, which is like a rom-com, and you're almost falling asleep. That's fine. But if it's like a very intense thriller, it's keeping your brain awake. And you have to, remember those old computers that you like used to turn off, and then they do like you. they make the sound.
Mhm.
It's the same with your brain. Like your brain needs winding down time. So you need to be able to do relaxing stuff before you get to bed. That's super important. And breath work can play like a really good role in that. I go one step further with the breathing techniques. I really use it like when I'm in my bed
Hmm.
and I'm struggling to fall asleep. I don't automatically do it like 20 minutes before going to bed, because some days I'm fine, and or like it's more in weeks or months that I have more difficult periods, and then sometimes I'll just use it when I'm in my bed. But I can definitely recommend that if you have sleeping problems, that you also work on your stress levels during the day, because it's the buildup of those hormones that I said. Like if you get that rush of adrenaline, you also get a rush of cortisol, and it's not so much the adrenaline that's bad for you, because like the decreasing time of adrenaline is pretty fast, so it goes away in a couple of minutes. But cortisol like builds up in your blood, and that is like detrimental for your sleep. So if you're not a very deep sleeper, you might wake up earlier because of the buildup of cortisol during the day. So, and it's to really combat that, or to offset that you need to do relaxing exercises during the day as well. So with people with very heavy sleeping problems, I recommend to do like breathing exercises with a Moonbird a couple times a day, shorter ones, and then use it as well before going to bed on a longer period of time.
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, we I like to say like that there needs to be transitions, or we call them energy breaks. And
Yeah.
that would be a great thing to do. Like one of the things that I always tell people is if you can even just take 5 minutes and just breathe and just focus on your breath, it would yield in between your activities or your events or whatever it is, getting out of your car, going in your house, whatever it is, before your next meeting, it makes such a
Yeah.
difference at night because there's not such a buildup, and you sort of been training you've been putting the brakes on, so to speak,
Mhm.
like you said.
Mhm.
So this would be a great opportunity for people to um to get into their body, to use a breath trainer, tactical breath trainer, to really just, again, how can we get out of our heads and into our bodies? That's the
Mhm.
big question I like to ask.
Yeah.
And everybody's a little bit different, but breathing is one of these things. Again, it's always with us. It's always here. And if we
Yeah.
know how to do it correctly, it's amazing. It can be
It's
amazing.
power.
Um,
It's a superpower.
it is. And I'll tell you from personal experience, I've been through some of these breath workshops,
Yeah.
uh, and man, it's amazing. You can really, I mean, it can be like a transcendental experience, learning how to
Yeah.
use your breath.
Yeah.
And it can be as simple as, again, getting your body into this state of relaxation to allow sleep to happen.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. I think that it's incredible that people don't have this knowledge. And
Hmm.
it's amazing, I think, that now people are getting tools and more understanding to then, people need the science to feel motivated to then do it, right?
Yeah, to be convinced at least. And I don't want to be like, I was there as well. I was in that spot. Like I had to read the signs. I need to be convinced first, and then I experienced it, and then I was like, oh my god, but the world needs to know this. So that's really when I said like, this is, I'm going to make it my mission to hopefully help as many people as possible. And we've like helped over 40,000 customers right now.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I honestly want like every person that struggles to fall asleep should at least experiment with it, because if you once you get the hang of it, once you like understand how you can breathe yourself into this deep relaxation state, it's incredible. It's a superpower. It just changes everything.
It really does. I'm a huge fan, and I believe it. And I love that you guys also, I know you had a sleep study research
Mhm.
paper published. Would you mind sharing just maybe a little bit about the findings and sort of what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So these were 40 people that were in our study. The study was conducted by an independent research institution, by the way. They got the Moonbird device and they used it for 1 month. And we did like pre-post measurements through surveys. And we asked those people, like, how well did you sleep? How long did you sleep this night? Blah, 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 blah. And on 8 out of the 10 metrics, and on the eight most important ones, we saw significant improvements. And that was, for instance, and when it comes to sleep quality, we saw almost 40% improvement on average.
Mm.
Um, and when it comes to restfulness during the day, I think it was like 30% that they felt more rested during the day. So there were a number of very important sleep parameters. Times waking up at night as well, significantly reduced. So people slept longer, they felt that they slept better, and they woke up less during the night. So that is really like the first way we can show that Moonbird impacts people's sleep for the best. Now, that's not new for me. So that was already done before, because there is obviously like a lot of scientific research evaluating the positive benefits of breath work when it comes to sleep. But we really wanted to do this as well with our device. And in that paper, we also connected a little bit more evidence on how did you like using the device? How do you find this? Is it like not disturbing your sleep as well? Because it is an extra device in your bed and things like that. And it
Mm.
was evaluated like really well. So we're very happy with the results and doing more research and hopefully publishing more research soon.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that you have the science background, the
Yeah.
PhD, and it's I think it's really nice because people really do want to hear about the science, and they also, and anecdotal evidence as well, right? Your own experience and
Yeah.
and the feedback from your clients, which I know, the customers, which I know has been really stellar, from our conversations and just doing my own research, which is
Mhm.
great. So you're making a huge difference. Well, listen, I want to thank you for, first and foremost, for having this conversation. And yeah, and so I'm so grateful that we were able to connect, um and really for utilizing. I want to thank you and acknowledge you for utilizing your brain and your intelligence, outside of the pharmaceutical world. Not to say that there's anything necessarily. Thank God we have medicine, and and I think we need really smart people to look outside of that box, to
Mhm.
that understand the box, but can also look outside of it to find other solutions to get us reconnected to our natural rhythms, whether
Yeah.
that be sleep, whether that be breath, whether that be light, whatever it is. And it's just amazing that we are now leveraging technology to help improve our life, where so much technology, I think, is detrimental to our mental, emotional, sleep health, mental health. So, thank you and your brother for putting together an awesome product and for being on mission to, yeah, to give back and to provide a solution that for people to really, improve their sleep health, their life, reduce their mental health as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love doing this, and I just honestly hope that we can help so many more people. That's really what we're working for every day. I think we've already managed and did some like, or we're able to achieve some successes in Europe, but we're now entering the US, and I hope we can do the exact same thing. And my mission will be completed when like even as many people as now in Europe, in the US will like become aware of the fact that they can use their breath as a tool. That's really what I'm going for.
I
So.
love it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's so needed here in the US. It's needed everywhere, but especially
Mhm.
needed here in the US because, we're workaholics,
Yeah.
stressaholics, big time insomniacs. So we share a similar mission. So yeah, so really great to have you. I will, for those people that are interested in, using the device or experimenting, I'll put links below this video with, where you can go and get the device, try it out, experience it for yourself,
Yeah,
understand what it is.
we have a 30-day trial period as well. So like
Oh,
you
fantastic.
you can just try it, and if it doesn't work, you can send it back. And we have low return rates, so I'm confident that it will work.
That's awesome. Well, again, thanks for, taking the time to have this conversation, and I'm sure we'll do a round two at some point. Check in with, what your findings are and where you're kind of taking things with the company. And, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
So much, Devin. Thanks for this.